Hi everybody, it's Linda with Joyful Makes and Finds, and I am back to do a little tutorial on how or demonstration maybe, on how I sew in a signature to my little cutie covers. After I posted the video of how I make my little cutie covers, I did have a couple of requests for showing actually how I sew the signatures in. And I do have in my videos playlist on Make Along With Me, maybe it's called, and I do have a video in there in how I sew in signatures, but it's easier to do it again, and this is a very simple way to show it. I think it was a multi-signature journal that I was doing in the other video. So anyway, so let's do that today, and then the next video I will do, we will be making some ephemera. So I wanted to show you, before I actually sew in the signature, how easy it is and kind of what my process is in creating the signature for little cutie journals. It's a little different in that you really need just a half a sheet of paper. If you're using 8.5 by 11 and you, let me show you, let me just grab a piece. So here is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and if you just cut it down the middle, it creates 2 pages for your little cutie journal. So each page is half of a sheet. So that's often why I create 2 little cuties instead of just one every time I make them, because whatever paper I'm choosing, if I cut it in half, I have a page for two separate journals, or you can use 2 of the same page in your signature. And I hope that's clear. So for instance, this was one large sheet of cardstock, and when I cut it in half, I created enough for both of my little cutie journals. If you use a 12 by 12 sheet, which is actually what this was, if you can cut it so that you actually have enough to fold up for pockets. If it's an 8.5 by 11, you'll just get enough for just a solid page. So I typically will use a heavier paper for the first page of the signature, like a cardstock. You don't have to, but that's usually what I do. And then I almost always use coffee dyed paper. And again, one sheet of 8.5 by 11 will get you 2 pages like this when you cut it. And then I always go through my gardening magazines, my cookbooks, all of the old books that I have purchased at flea markets and thrift stores and such that I use just for my journals. So my gardening books are my favorites. And so I was able to cut it in half. There were images on the bottom, and that page is in the other journal that I'm making. I usually always use a couple of shorts, and this is just a cute little notepad, and probably purchased at the Dollar Tree. This was a sheet of painty paper from my sister. She will create background pages and, you know, experiment with colors and stuff, and I just ask her to save every little thing for me because I'll use it, and I just think this is beautiful. So it's just a painty sheet. This is a piece of vintage stationery or letter writing paper that I folded in half. This is a digital, and again, it was an entire sheet digital, and I cut it in half, and this half is in this journal, and the other side of it is in the other journal, but you could use both in one journal if you wanted to. Okay, and then this is a page from a vintage sewing book. I actually made an altered book out of this book a couple of years ago, I guess. So that's just a page from that. And the small books like that make perfect size pages for the little cuties. This was a 12 by 12 piece of scrapbook paper, and so therefore it was big enough to fold in. So I made a page with a fold out for journaling, and I'll probably do some stenciling and you know, add some color or something to that blank spot. This was a piece of Braille paper that I dyed with the Easter egg dies when I did that. And again, it was 8.5 by 11 and I cut it in half. So there's a page in each journal. This is a page, a vintage piece of stationery, a vintage Mary Englebright stationery page. This is a little paper bag. And when I mentioned you can make these paper bag journals in any size, this is a 5 by 7. So is it? Yeah, I think it's 5 by 7. So look what a cute little size journal this would make. In just the same style of, you can cover it with fabric in just the same way. You can also cover it with paper as well. Or you can line it with paper and then just leave the outside as is and decorate it. I mean, the sky's the limit with these little paper bag journals. But I like to put the paper bag, the small little paper bag, in the paper bag journal. I think that's kind of a cute look. Here's just a page of loose leaf. Sometimes I'll use coffee dyed loose leaf. I thought I'd keep this one white with the blue because it kind of matches some of the coloring in the journal itself. This is a page from a cross stitch or a needlepoint booklet, and I'm using it. And this one even has just a little tiny tear on the edge. And what I may do is repair that with a little piece of washi or a little piece of like faux vintage Scotch tape. And I think that's just part of the charm. You know, you can use these little pages. They don't have to be perfect. This is a digital front and back. This is one of my sister's digitals from her shop, South City Hues. And it's again a half of it. The other half is in the other journal. And then I put a doily in the center. It's the first time I've chosen to do this. I don't usually, but I think I might do it in this journal just for something different. So then, of course, all the back sides are the same. So how many sheets is this? I usually use 15 to 18, well, 14 to 18 sheets, just depending on how thick the pages are. And then that will create, if you use 15 sheets, you're going to have 30 pages or 60 sides. So that usually will make a perfect size journal. There's no pockets, there's no ephemera. So that will allow room for pockets and ephemera. And mine usually gator mouth just a little bit, but not too bad. Okay, so that's enough about that. Let me show you how I sew them in. So what I do first is I go through, you always want to make sure you've got your everything facing the right direction so you don't sew any pages in upside down. So I go page by page, I line it up the way I want it. Some people like to line them up in all different places. Some people like to line them up just right across the center. I do a kind of a combination of both. The first couple pages, oftentimes I will just center perfectly. So I'm just going to center these so that they are about the same in the top and bottom. Now the little short pages, often, not really in the center. Let me scooch over, sorry about that. The short pages, sometimes I will scatter, like sometimes at the top, sometimes at the bottom, sometimes I'll put them in different spots. Okay, so I'm going to move this. It's a little different doing it on camera than it is. Sometimes I do this part on my lap. Okay, so how do I like this? Do I like it like this, or do I like it in the center? Actually, I'm still kind of liking it in the center. Okay. Okay. And we'll just add it sheet by sheet. This one will be in the center because it's the tallest. You know what? I bet I'm going to end up centering almost all of these. There's absolutely no rules. It's just a matter of how do you like the end result. So put it, center it, put some of them at the top, some of them at the bottom. You can fold some pages not straight, fold them off center And then you have a very interesting, like almost a triangular page. You can do that as well. But you know what? I'm kind of liking this one. Centered. Why is that? Just a centered kind of day for me today. Okay, I'm just centering. Okay. And then I'm also just eyeballing to make sure I've got everything straight. I mean, everything right side up. Nothing is upside down. Okay. So I'm going to turn it, make sure all the folds are lining up. And then I'm going to take, okay, so this is my front. I always got to make sure of that, and I'll check myself. Yep, that pocket's still at the bottom, right? So I'm going to center it in my cover. Get my kind of press here so that I've got my creases, my center spine crease lining up, and I'm going to put these great big jumbo clips, one on one side. I'm going to press so I have a nice crisp fold, and I'm going to put another big clip on the other side. I do have some of these listed in my shop because I think when I purchased them I had to buy a larger quantity, and I've been selling extras. Okay, so once again I'm going to check, and I have, this is the back, this is the bottom, right? Just making sure that I'm not sewing things upside down. And if you start to make journals, trust that you will sew in something upside down at some point and have to take it out and redo it. It's just part of it. No matter how seasoned you are, it can still happen. Okay, so I'm ready to sew in. There's a couple different ways, several different ways you can do it. You need an awl or a pointy thing. You can get these in kits on Amazon. You can usually find a small kit that will have the bookbinding thread. It's waxed with the awl. Sometimes they'll have a few other things with it, a needle, and you can just purchase that however you want individually. This is my favorite waxed linen thread. I've bought lots of different waxed linen threads, some colorful, some waxed, I've actually bought unwaxed. I've used baker's twine. I've used embroidery floss, and this is what I come back to time after time. So I am going to list the link to this, the Amazon link to this, in my description box so you can see exactly what I purchase. Not that you have to use it. It just happens to be what works for me. Okay, so the way that I determine how much of this I need is you want to go 3 times the length of your book. 1, 2, 3. And I always add a 4th, only because I like to keep my ties long and I bead the bottoms of them. If you are just going to tie little knots, and tie a little knot in the center and not dangle anything from the ends of the signatures, you just do 3 times the length of your book, and then just cut it. And then you want to have a needle. They sell bookbinding needles on Amazon. I tend to use large eye sewing needles only because I have found the bookbinding needles a little thicker than what I like, but it is totally your choice. Try the bookbinding needle, and if it feels big, I just order large eye sharp sewing needles, and there's usually a variety of widths, and from there it's just a matter of what feels the best in your hand, what's the easiest for you to deal with. And I just thread my needle. Okay, now we're going to talk about poking holes. You can do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. You can do a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. In these little cuties, I always do 3 holes, just because it's simpler and it holds them really well. And you can also, as you're deciding where to poke your holes, you can create a template. And what you do is I just take a 2-inch piece of paper that's exactly the same size as my signature, and I divide it in thirds. I find the center, I fold it in half, and then you can lay this right here. And then you can just take your awl and you can poke your holes, all 3 holes all the way through. Now I'm going to show you a tool that I have that's called a book cradle, and they're sold in an Etsy shop called Crafty Cat USA, I think. I can also link that in the description box. And I learned about these book cradles from Gail Augustinelli. It's something that's made with one of those 3D laser printers. So I was making journals at least a year and a half before I purchased a book cradle, and I will say I absolutely love it. There's sometimes you can only really use this book cradle to put holes in the cover if it's a 1 signature cover. If you've got a spine, then you're not going to be able to put the spine in here to poke your holes. It will only hold it if you're like in a good solid V. So you can use this to poke the holes in your signatures, but in your spine, if you've got a wide spine, you'll have to just use, you know, a template and a pokey tool and like poke it into either a piece of, you know, a wood block or a really thick book or whatever you use for your base. I hope that makes sense. So what I do, because I make these all the time, is I do not even use this. If I was going to, I would just center it and use it as a guide for my holes. But what I want to do is just show you how easy it is. Oh, so sorry. Okay. I want to show you how easy it is to just eyeball it. I am just going to eyeball. I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing. I am just eyeballing the center, poking all the way down and up, straight up. And then I'm going to go to this side, eyeballing it. It's no big deal if it's not exactly perfect. And then eyeballing it. Straight down, and I usually give it a good twist just to make sure I'm going through all the layers and making a hole that I can see from the back side. So I have 3 holes. And then I'm going to take my thread. I'm going to remove my book cradle. And now I'm ready to sew. And what I do is I go down from the center with my needle, pull it through, and I leave a nice size tail. And then I'm going to go, and it doesn't matter if you go down the top or down the bottom, either one. Then you come up through that bottom hole. And sometimes, I will say, this is a little hard to pull. So I have a flat nose pliers that I use for making dangles and jewelry, and I usually will have this handy just because it helps my hands not have to pull so hard to get that needle through. Okay, and then I'm going to pull that taut. I'm going to go down into my top hole. Whoops, not centered, sorry. Pull that rather taut. Then I'm going to go down. I'm going to go down into the center. And then this is where, when you sew in your signature, you just want to make sure, sorry, I'm just going to, okay. So you just want to make sure that you are not coming up through this thread and splitting it, because that will cause a problem. So you just want to make sure that you're coming up alongside of it and not within it. And you'll know, because it's not going to want to tighten if you've gone through your thread. Okay, and then you just tighten it. You want to make sure it's taut like a guitar string. If it's loose and not tightening, it could be that you've gone through your thread, gone through this side of the thread when you came up, and you just kind of have to fiddle with it and untangle it or undo it and do that middle one again. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so I've got it good and tight, and then you just tie right over left and left over right, or the opposite way. You just tie a square knot, essentially. You can tie a bow, you can cut it off, just tie the knot, cut it off, tie a bow, cut it off. I'm gonna leave mine because I will put beads on the ends of them. You could also bring them over the top and use them to create a beaded, a beaded tassel that way. I have also done both. Brought one to the top, one to the bottom, and then had beads on the bottom, and then used this to create a dangle. But I don't do that very often anymore. In fact, rarely. I usually just put beads at the bottom. Okay, so that is it. So then you can remove your, I'm gonna have to be careful I don't tear my doily here. Remove your clips. And your signature is in. There you go. And that is it. And then sometimes as I showed you when I did the tutorial on sewing the cover, I'll just put a little lace here, or you can just leave it like that. I mean, you can hardly see it. Sometimes if I add lace, it's usually just because it makes it look pretty. And I haven't decorated these yet. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to decorate them. I have a couple ideas, but haven't settled on anything yet. Okay, so my next step is going to be to create pockets. So, and then I'm going to make some ephemera. So the ephemera we're going to do together. If creating some pockets is something you want to see, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, we'll just move on to making some fun ephemera. We're going to make those. I think the very next thing I'm going to do is make those button shaker cards or button shaker tags that I showed in my Daisy journals. Okay, so that's it. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you enjoyed this, found it helpful, please like, comment, subscribe to my channel. I'm a small channel. I've been around a while, but I'm a pretty small channel and I would love to grow. So tutorials is kind of something I'm branching into more this year. So I'd love feedback to see if they're helpful. Too long, too short, just right. Anything, any kind of feedback you want to leave me would be great. Okay, you have a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon with another project. Bye-bye.